maybe you think about where do you get your own ideas from as well. We're thinking about, how creative do you feel in lockdown? Have you become more creative? Have you become less creative? Where are these new ideas yourselves coming from? So the main thing to point out, guys, is that this is a talk show where you guys are our guests. So you guys are going to be the ones who are going to take us through this whole discussion. My name's Evie. I'm in the middle. I'm not allowed to give any of my own opinions, so I need your opinions to talk about, because I can't give any opinions of my own. So I think we've got a few people in here now. So I think we should start kicking off the discussion. Does anyone have any ideas, opinions about this topic? Where do researchers get their ideas? Does anyone know where you think you get your ideas?
Is anyone a researcher? I think we could just start off with that question, because we're not 100% sure we've got any researchers in the room. And it's going to be a different conversation if there's no researchers. Does anybody here do any research? Anybody? We've got a shake of the head from Christina. We've got
Kaiser. Is that how I pronounce your name, Kaiser?
Yeah, Kezia.
Kezia, thank you, Kezia. You've got your hands up. You're a researcher. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
No, I'm a master's student at Cambridge University, and I'm doing my research in education.
What was that? Research in what?
Education.
Oh, brilliant. So what kind of, how does one go about doing research in education then?
Experience and literature, really. Reading and your own experiences in education. I think that's where it comes from. For me, anyway. I can't speak for anybody else.
And how have you, what kind of research are you working on at the moment? Can you give us any examples?
Yeah, I can. My research right now is on how girls are doing in art in a single-sex school setting. That's what my research is about right now.
and have you have you had any findings from that so far?
No, that's my task for this Easter. I've got about a stack of questionnaires this big to sift through and transcribe my interviews, but that's about it.
Brilliant. So I've got, and you've, I'm going to say Katie's popped her hand up on the chat. For anyone else who's involved as well, if you want to say a point or share your ideas, either you can use your link, put your hands up, or you can just wave at me on the screen as well. But I'm going to go to Katie over here. You had a question about Kezia's research. I think we might need you to go off mute, Katie. A classic Zoom moment right there.
My bad. Sorry. Just joined. Not so much a question to her, but maybe a thought to your first question. I think nowadays, with access to internet, anyone can do the research, no matter their background. And I know a lot of people. I personally know a lot of scientists, particularly in physics community, because I studied physics and applied computer science myself. And I think that usually the process of research goes from hypothesis to information collection and then evaluation of it, rough steps. And but I think the first step is hypothesis, and getting those is very interesting, because I found that sometimes they come from even fiction or fantasies, and sometimes they come even from jokes. I wanted to share that recently I was watching a video where there is a joke among physicists that since energy is conserved, theoretically it should be possible to slap chicken in such a way that it would get cooked, essentially converting kinetic energy to thermal energy. And a guy actually designed a slapping machine, and he cooked the chicken by slapping it.
Wow. Okay. I think that's a sound effect from Mikey there. So maybe poor chicken. Maybe that didn't quite do too well for the chicken itself. But that's a brilliant one. So Katie's saying, actually ideas can come from really, really strange places. So maybe you can get your ideas for your research ideas, your science ideas from a joke. Do people agree? Do they disagree? Is that how you guys find out your research ideas? If you are a researcher, maybe you want to find out more from a researcher here about how you create ideas. Do you think Mikey's got a point that he wants to make?
There's also a point in the chat from Emily saying that sounds like a lockdown project this chicken cooking, and I think that's definitely it. But I just want to pick up on something that Katie said. Oh, you can just do your research on Google. Is it? I want to just put that out there. Is it possible, really, to research an idea on Google? What do people think about that? Is that true? Is Google the biggest research tool, or is it like the worst research tool? Maybe a bit of both.
Christina, I'm going to get you in on this point. Is Google a good research tool? Is it a terrible one?
For me, it's a good research tool to start. As I work in science communication, for me, it's good. But picking on the point that Katia was saying about people being researching without actually being on a lab or being, academically scientists, I think that's a really interesting point, and I think it's happening a lot more. And maybe it's not just Google, but the internet and communities online and communities in different areas are helping that. I think information is so accessible at the moment that I think that it's opened doors in some ways, and it's definitely happening. I don't know about in physics because I don't have any experience on that, but in terms of botany, for example, and community science and mycology, that is happening a lot. There's a lot of knowledge being shared around communities and around people, and then there's people doing genetics in the garage and things like that. So yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay, so Christina thinks that actually Google, it's allowed this kind of democratization of research. Now a lot more people can get involved than they used to be able to. Do people agree? I can see some nodding heads there. Does anyone disagree? I think Alex, you're nodding to yourself there. Have you got experience in this?
I completely agree. Each time more we're seeing citizen projects that are asking for the citizens and their knowledge of what different topics that they might know about, or just spotting the differences, in different images. There's a great project that is the green pea galaxies. These came from a citizen science project. No one knew they existed. Physicists didn't know. Astrophysicists didn't know they existed. It was citizens who spotted them in a citizen science project. They were like, oh, this doesn't look like something that scientists have told us about. These are green and they're different. And they kept telling the researchers, hey, look, there's something here that's unusual. And the researchers like, no. And in the end, yes, they were. They discovered something new.
And what was it you said that they discovered a different type of galaxy?
The green pea galaxies, they're called.
And can you explain that they're green?
They are green. They look like a pea.
Well, that kind of explains the name, doesn't it? I guess, yeah, that's how do researchers get their ideas? How do researchers name things? Is that, should we be naming things after ourselves? Should we be naming after them what they look like? Where are we going to go with this? I've got Mikey's got a point here behind me.
I think to me as well, that kind of asks the next question along the line, which is, what is considered a good idea? We're talking about these ideas come from, we've heard from a joke, from Google, from just asking the people, but how do you know what the good ideas are, or how do those ideas kind of filter through? We've heard about the green pea galaxy, but in other contexts and in other fields, is it the same that just the good idea will just get to the top, or just by it being the best idea just appear?
Okay, so maybe Mikey's thinking just because you have a good idea, does it always get the airtime that it maybe deserves? The green pea galaxy people, they had to fight for their idea to be believed. Katie, you had a point. You had your hand up.
I think in general, evaluation of a good idea is summed up very well in a phrase I really love a lot. It is if something looks stupid but it works, it's not stupid. So a lot of these ideas, even with these home projects, kind of where regular people were spotting different galaxies, I have also participated in that a little bit, very tiny bit, but I definitely joined in because it was fascinating. And I think that the internet age allows it to go across much larger group of people, whereas before only the people in the lab were involved and could have their opinions, which was very localized, whereas now everyone can share their opinions. And for some, an idea may not look that good, but if enough people get fascinated by it, then maybe it was a good idea. So I think that's a very good way to evaluate it.
Hello, we've got some new people in the chat actually as well. Want to welcome John, I want to welcome Joe, we've got Kadzia as well. Let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, everyone. I think we've got Helen and YC. So I just want for the new people. Hello, is that John there? Welcome to Talkaoke. We are a pop-up talk show where you guys are our VIPs. So if you guys have got some ideas that you want to share, you've got some opinions, maybe you're a researcher yourself, maybe you want to find out more about what researchers do, maybe you've had a fun lockdown project that you want to tell us about and where you got that idea from. Val's had some good points in the chat, I've just noticed. So Val was saying you find a good idea by discarding a few hundred bad ideas. I don't know, Val, if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
I don't speak very well. You get an idea, you think it might be a good one, you dig into it more, you ask a few people, you do a lot of work on it, and then you think, that's a bad idea. And then you go and find something else to do. Not everything you touch is gold. You have to spend a lot of time doing the wrong thing.
And you sound like you've got some experience in that. I mean, what do you do day to day when you're trying to, come up with these ideas? Are you a researcher? Are you an artist? Are you a teacher?
I'm just me.
Just you. Brilliant. Well, there we go. Thank you very much for that, Val. So we've had a few concepts going on right now. So the democratization of research. We've got how do you come up with good new ideas. We also had, some discussions earlier about lockdown projects. I don't know whether anyone else has embraced any kind of lockdown projects over the past year or so. How did you guys come up with those projects? If so, how have you found they're going? This is where we're going to go with this, guys. What ideas have you got that you want to bring to the table? Oh, we've got some new people as well. We've got Justine. I'm going to welcome to Justine as well. I've got some ideas. We've got John as well, who's just welcome. So, where do researchers get their ideas from? What do scientists do when they are stuck, for example? That's the other thing. What do you do when you're in a creative rut? Has anyone got any tips for if you're in a creative rut? How do you get out of that? Oh, well, we were feeling, there we go.
Christina's got a question there.
Well, I was just going to say, again, I'm not a researcher myself, but I work with researchers a lot. And for me, what they always say is that the best ideas come in conversations or when not working on the research, actually. So I work in a museum with collections, and they sometimes go and they're looking at the collection and they see something that they haven't seen before and they go, oh, that's great, I'd like to study that. And then from there they build a project, and I find that really, really cool. Or they will go and start chatting with somebody from a complete different field, and then they realize that they have something in common where they can build something. So yeah, conversations and like actually stepping out from what you're working on and then see if something else come up. That's what I've heard, at least.
Can I just ask then, Christina, if that's the case, are we, because we're not having these serendipitous conversations right now, because apart from on Talkaoke, of course, are we losing that sort of like fertile ground for ideas where you actually, just in having a chat about something, or just the chit chat and the general flow of conversation, you talking to other experts, you have ideas just kind of generate? Have we been suffering by being in lockdown, or are they happening in other ways, this idea generation?
Oh, I mean, probably you're losing something there. I think everyone, like the lack of contact with other people is making us lose in many ways, not only in research, but in other things that we might have been doing, like trips or holidays or hanging out with people. But coming back to what Katie was saying before, I think because we have the internet and we're lucky enough that this lockdown came in a time where we have more than a Nokia's to communicate with each other. I think that that's been lucky enough that you can still communicate with people, and if you're interested enough, you can still chat with them.
Very annoying.
Brilliant. So we've got these ideas that a lot of our best ideas come from communicating with other people. And has the internet been a good kind of a good simulacrum for that? Has it been a good kind of exchange instead of actually meeting people face to face? Are we missing something, or have we been able to kind of get by through that? I mean, has anyone else? What have other people's had experience from this? I'm also going to check the chat as well, because we've had a few people talking about some ideas come from necessity. Okay, so COVID cancer is brilliant. So do a lot of the best ideas come out from necessity? I've got Iona, you're kind of nodding there in the corner. Do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Well, what do you do when you're not on Talkaoke, Iona?
What do I do? I'm a software developer, and I recently developed a engagement activity for my team. So that was a necessity, and that's where my public engagement, let's say, journey started from. Yeah.
Brilliant. You got a round of applause from Mikey. So you said you had to create this software for your team. Why did they need it? Tell me a bit more about that necessity.
It was to make data available to other scientists, RNA scientists in particular, help them in their day-to-day work and research. And basically that's the reason why I was developing this software to enable RNA research, for example.
Brilliant. Okay, so you are actually having to you come up with new ways to actually share information and share ideas, because maybe it's not just about having a conversation. Sometimes you need these kind of new systems. Brilliant. So yeah, like a lot of ideas maybe have come from necessity. We're thinking about sharing ideas. How do we talk to people? Does anyone disagree? Do some of our ideas actually, are they always driven by necessity? Are we always sort of really results driven?
They say necessity is the mother of invention, but that in a way kind of sort of completely contradicts this kind of whimsical notion of idea generation that Christine brought in. So can these two things exist in parallel? Or maybe just ideas come whether they're necessary or not. I mean, maybe, who knows? Who's done some research on this? That's why. Does anyone research how ideas actually arise? That might be an interesting question as well. Let's get. I mean, there's a few people here on the chat. I also want to say it's really nice to be able to see your faces as well. So if you can turn your camera on, that would be great, because it's nice to see people. It makes our job easier, because then we can also find out just looking at your faces where where to take the conversation, because we know what looks interesting and what looks boring.
And that's a snore if you want, if you're not sure. When I first heard that sound, I thought it was a rattlesnake, which was slightly worrying. But there you go. That was what my idea was.
Rattly snore. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. Sometimes ideas, I think, come from miscommunications, mishearing, or just getting things wrong. Wrong assumptions.
I think, because we were talking a bit about this, but about thinking about the Cambridge Festival. We were thinking about Newton and how he got his ideas. There's quite a famous story around that. But before we dig into that, we've got Margot who's got her hand up. So I'm going to go to Margot.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just really interested in what you said, Mikey, about ideas coming from maybe getting things wrong. And I wonder, for people who are scientists, who do kind of ideas professionally, shall we say, I mean, is it easy to make mistakes, or are you expected to come up with like a bang on great idea straight away project that is like feasible and it's easily supported, fundable, and all those kinds of things? Or is it a common thing to say like, well, here's some money, go and do this thing, doesn't matter if it's good, just like go and have fun? I just wondered about that.
Okay, interesting. So is it that, you're wondering, does today's society, today's work culture allow for mistakes and experimentation, or are we under pressure to sort of get things right all the time? I mean, it sounds like most people here have got some experience of like maybe not necessarily doing research, but for working in some points. Do you find like this is the case? Do you find that you've got room to get things wrong in your jobs, to experiment, or are you driven too much by necessity perhaps? Not so.
Let's have somebody come on. So there's a few people out there that have not said anything yet. I can tell that they're pondering. That's why it's great to have the cameras on. We can see the pondering happening. So come on, join in. Don't be shy. Join in, some of you people.
I'm going to go to, I think, Siobhan, have you got are we saying your name correctly, Siobhan?
Yes, you are. I'll give it a go. I have a PhD in molecular biology, so I basically did a lot of lab-based research. And yes, the funding situation makes it very difficult, I think, to do what they call blue sky discovery, like try something completely new. You often don't get funded for that. So typically you get funded for things that build on already known work, like particularly like in the research group you are in. So, you've had many people work in that group come through, and you tend to like work on projects that kind of build off those discoveries. And so it's sort of like a step-by-step thing that builds up on a kind of a foundation of knowledge already. And that's more likely to get funded. So I think it's actually probably, and that's the pressure of finances and, in research. And I think that's a bad thing.
You've got the angry sound there. Mikey.
Can you say a little bit more about what you do, just so we can get a hook on it?
Well, okay, so I've done a bunch of different things, but let's see. I started off investigating a host protein involved in HIV life cycle, which led me into cancer research. And I basically did like protein X-ray crystallography. So I looked at the basic, very molecular structure of the protein that I worked on to see how it functions. And it's an anti-cancer target. So you can use it for a drug. You can use the crystal structure for drug discovery, because you can basically model exactly how drugs will interact with it. Then I moved on to like a totally different RNA field. So many different things. And I'm trying to do more like machine learning AI for science. So it's like all over the place.
Sounds like you maybe need to have a conversation with the owner as well. But what I wanted to find out actually was, you mentioned that there's this pressure of funding, that you're often building on research that has already taken place, that's got a long history. Is there any kind of like blue skies thinking or research areas that you would want to research if you had the chance?
Probably, I'm not actually quite sure, because I'd say in terms of me, I'm not great with generating the ideas. I'm good at implementing the work, so I'm quite good at like figuring out the problems once someone else has once the head of the lab has sort of thought up the big dream. I'm quite good at implementing it. I'm not great with ideas, I have to admit that.
Well, this is a perfect place because maybe we can find out, where do researchers get their ideas from? So maybe you've got that creativity of actually implementing the ideas, but maybe today we can do a bit of brainstorming in terms of where do researchers actually get their ideas from?
I mean, the other side of that, it might be, that's where the money is, for the reason that we've got like too many ideas out there. The ideas is the easy bit. Maybe actually doing the research side of it is actually the tough bit, that where you need to put the funding. So maybe that is right, because you just need to go into Google to get ideas. But, when it comes to actually verifying them, testing them, exploring them more deeply, maybe maybe that's the right model. Is there a point to have space and time for just crazy ideas or blue sky cross-discipline kind of idea generation? Or are we just really just stuck dealing with the ideas that we've got on the table already, and we need to kind of move through those? That's the question that I'm throwing out there.
And does anyone have any answers? Luke, I'm going to go straight to you. Take yourself off mute. Just there we go.
Well, I don't know if I've got any answers, but I think public perception of like science is quite vulnerable to the public perception of it, and we need to be doing basic research that, just as much as what people think of as practical research. So I think it is a big challenge of how, the more I've talked to my friends who didn't like science at school, the more I realize how alienated they are from science, and they find it quite intimidating. So I think it is, like, I really love science and I find it really exciting. So I try to, explain things to my friends in an interesting way. And I've worked in the Science Museum as a science communicator, which was, doing the same thing. But I think it's it's a two-way street, because a lot of people have an opinion on where they think money should go, but they don't know anything about it. There's that question of everyone's got an opinion, but how do you weigh up informed versus uninformed opinions? Because it's I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's a question that hasn't really been answered. Like, I think some sort of, you know, thinking for the government or society, that we have to think about how can we make sure everyone's sort of believes in the same reality, to, you know, because the mission to Mars has been really important, and some people complain about, they say, you know, we're sending money up into space, but that money's not, you're not loading money into a rocket and then shooting it up to Mars. People get on Earth are getting paid, like engineers and scientists are getting paid with, you know, by that money. But it's yeah, so I don't have any answers, just questions.
Well, no, but it's all right, because we've got lots of people who want to respond to that. So I'm going to go first to Val and then to Katie.
Yes, one of the big problems is that the people who make the decisions and the people who control the media and write all the blurb that you see everywhere are not scientists. The scientists are at the mercy of the people who don't understand the science, and they're the ones that make a noise about it. So there are not very many non-scientists who have any comprehension of the importance of it.
Okay, brilliant. So I think there's some good themes going on. So we're talking about, just for people who've just joined, welcome. We're sort of talking about like maybe the public perceptions of science, whether people understand it, and then the kind of understanding of science by people who are doing it. So is there a gap? And does that mean that we're not doing enough research into like pure areas of science where we can actually further our knowledge? And maybe we're being a bit too practical. Maybe we're being put in these little silos.
I also want to bring in like Luke's friends that are alienated by science. What's going to bring them on side? What's going to actually get them excited and join the conversation as well?
And I think Val also had a great point of the people who are communicating science to the public. Are they the right people to be doing that? Do they understand that themselves? Katie, there have been loads of things there. I'm sure you've got an opinion on one of them. So please share with the group.
Oh, I have opinions on all of them, but I just have to pick on which ones to give it. The finance topic of the research in particular, I find it very, very interesting and concerning at the same time. And I even have an idea for a solution, but I'm not sure if it's the right place to share it. But recently I've been following one Harvard astrophysics professor very, very closely for over a year now, maybe two, Avi Loeb. And he continuously in all of his interviews points out a huge discrepancy about what a large part of society wants to know about, and how totally researchers and scientists are ignoring many of those subjects. So I think that it is part of the equation regarding the finance. I think if some scientists would say, guys, like openly to the whole world, I want to do a research on a topic that so many are concerned about, I'm pretty sure many non-researchers would happily throw their money at it. It wouldn't be organizations, it wouldn't be universities, it wouldn't be governments, it would be just simple people financing it just because they're curious about it. And a lot of times scientists are more interested, at least from my experience, in incremental research instead of a groundbreaking research. And it was a problem not only among scientists, but among the companies as well. And SpaceX did a great job, and Elon Musk did a great job in teaching everyone a lesson how it's the wrong way to do everything, engineering, science, whatever it is, because it makes it extremely sluggish. And in technology, we have such great boosts because everyone seems to be pushing each other to go faster, further, and do more radical approaches to problems. And very often, because of the lack of funding or fear of lack of funding, many researchers may feel cautious about it. But I think we need many more initiatives, maybe even public ones, where a group of researchers would pick up a topic that everyone wants to know about, whether it's controversial or not, and just do the research, no matter the outcome, whether it's like confirming the idea or denying it. I think finding out the truth with everyone's involvement would be a much better way, and the communication wouldn't be so much of a problem. It wouldn't have that media gap in between. Because it would be maybe people funding them without the gap of the government or institutions, and then people waiting for the results without the gap of the media.
So do you think we should be having like this kind of Kickstarter model of science that actually there's too much of a gap at the moment for the public and
in
scientists?
some areas. I don't think it would be great in all of the areas, but I'm pretty sure there would be hundreds of areas where it would work amazingly.
Okay, brilliant. I'm going to stop there because you've got quite a few hands up there. So I'm going to go for Val first.
Yes, actually, there's an ME researcher in America did a sort of GoFundMe to do some research, and people, mainly patients with ME, funded his research, and it's being done again in the UK, well, and some other countries as well. We, the patients, are raising the money for the research into myalgic encephalomyelitis because nobody else is paying for it.
That's really interesting. So it's kind of like a just to sort of maybe like dig a little bit deeper in that. You know, you've got that example of like patients with a particular particular diagnosis, and they're actually funding a particular scientist to do research into their diagnosis, to their illness or their disease. What is, I guess, you know, how does that compare, do you think, to something like cancer research, or maybe like a charity which is specifically doing research in that area?
Well, the thing is, I think a lot of the funding with biomedical stuff comes from the pharmaceutical companies. And they've got to see money at the end of the line. And if they can't see that there's money at the end of the line, they're not going to fund it. And ME is so misunderstood that people can't get government funding, well, until recently couldn't get government funding for it. And so we have basically kick-started the research by funding it ourselves. And because they're starting to find things all over the world, this is then making, I don't know what the government thing, the people who hand out the government money for health, I don't know who they're called, they're actually then realizing, yes, there is mileage in this, and starting to fund it. But this is how we have been battling for decades to get some research into our condition. There's there's a lot going on. I haven't got the words to explain it very well, sorry.
No, I think that was brilliant. It was really great having a concrete example as well. And I think it sparked some opinions around the table as well. I'm going to go to Siobhan first, and then maybe over to Mikey.
I just meant to make the point you mentioned, like cancer research. I did my PhD at Imperial, but my lab later moved to Cancer Research UK. And they were, at least for our labs and the labs around me, they were amazing because they funded very, very basic research, like looking at like yeast to help understand cancer. And it was really amazing for the scientists working there because we had a lot more funding, a lot more freedom because they were just so well set up. But the problems with the economy will always affect charities like that because their finances also kind of go up and down on that. But yeah, that was a lot. That was really good compared to looking for government funding all the time.
Brilliant. Thank you, Siobhan. I'm going to go to Mikey as well.
Well, I mean, I just want to, sorry, this is a bit of a complex point, but we did a Talkaoke session for culture organizations, and they were talking about this idea of a culture voucher where Rishi Sunak was going to write a huge check for culture, but it was all going to the major institutions. They come up with this idea with get people to choose what culture they wanted to be paid for. So you'd have a culture voucher. But I'm wondering if you could have the same thing in science, that people could actually choose what research, to a certain extent, what research actually they wanted their tax money to be funded towards. So you could have a kind of research voucher. And I think that would also be a really good way to actually get people more interested in research as well, because then if you're choosing it, you're actually taking part, you're actually thinking about it and taking part in that debate.
So we've got the culture vouchers being floated there. And Alex, you like that idea. You had your hand up. Share with us what you want to say.
I think this is an interesting idea, but it's very difficult to put in practice. How do I for example, that have no idea about astrophysics, choose what needs to be funded in in this area. I think this is a good idea, but for that to happen, we would all need a really important level of science knowledge, I think. So I think the idea is good, but we really need to be careful, because the research that's taking place is extremely difficult to understand if you're not every day in the lab. And just to understand it from an outsider perspective, it's so complicated, and it's so easy for someone to come in and say, they are not, this is not happening. I can find the cure for this and fund me, and I will do that. So I really think we need to be really careful with that.
Oh, brilliant. So we're going back to that theme we talked about a bit earlier about public perceptions of science, and then also how they're kind of communicated to the public. So whether you're a good salesman or not. Christina.
Yeah, and following up on the point that Alexandra made, is that, it will be really difficult for people to do that, because even people who are in science, if you're in one field of science, for you it's really difficult to understand all the fields. So I think it comes down to more science communication and more science education for the public as well, which is something that I think what other people are sharing as well, is like we have friends that they don't have a background in science, and we see that they struggle, they feel alienated, or they feel that there's something that's not for them, and in that case, how are they going to pick that? And it also makes me think about, if a lab or a scientist or a company already has money to put out a big media campaign or a big advertising campaign about how important the research is in front of other ones, it comes down to money, about how you can convince people again to do that, which, if you look at politics, if you look at companies, if you look at things, you see indie companies popping up, indie GoFundMe projects that people get engaged with, but it's still really difficult. You have to have that, so it can get really unbalanced. You have to be really careful with that. I'm not saying that the model that we have now to fund projects is good, but it's also like, it makes you think about how can you encourage this change, and how can you create a change that is actually meaningful and makes sense and actually going to be beneficial, and not keep benefiting the same people that are being benefited at the moment.
So where do we think, Luke, you want to pop in on that? We'll go to you, Luke.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think the idea of like a science factory is quite interesting. It's definitely got the challenges that Alexandra and Christina talked about, but it made me think that a lot of the times when people, they say, why am I studying geometry or algebra? I'm never going to use it. But if you actually did have to choose where your money went, that actually might make people more invested in learning, because it would be, listen, when you get to 18 and you get your science voucher or whatever, you're going to need to know this. So maybe it could be sort of could make people invest, feel like they're invested a bit more, so they would learn themselves. Because at the end of the day, people have to learn themselves. You can't just like force information on them. If people don't care, they're not going to learn. So, I mean, don't know how the system would work, but I thought could have some like unintended benefits as well. Where are my science vouchers? Who's handing them out? Where can I get some?
Brilliant. So maybe the problem with science communication as it is at the moment, and people not feeling engaged, maybe we could solve that financially. Maybe people need to get engaged more financially, and that way we can kind of bridge this gap, I guess, that there seems to be between scientists, between science communicators, and then the public. There seems to be a bit of a triangle going on right now.
We've got a thumbs up there from is it Jorge?
Or Jorge?
Well, at least come online and tell us how to say your name right. But we did get a thumbs up from you. So have you got anything else to add to that? I like the idea of the fact that there's a kind of, in a way, a psychological fallacy that once we've invested something, we end up investing more. So it's almost like, I think, dealing with human psychology in the right way, that you're getting people to invest, and then they'll just be hooked. A bit like how Talkaoke works.
Oh, because everyone's bought in for this. It's the start of a pyramid scheme. Yeah.
As soon as somebody throws in an idea, then they're hooked. They want to hear more ideas and contribute more ideas. So, maybe it'll work as well with the science voucher. What
threads are people sort of piqued by in here? I mean, we've got a lot going on. Do you think it's true that if you are financially invested in something, you are more interested in it? Where some nods there from Val, maybe yes, I think so. Christina, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to put out there that I was just thinking about this, about how to involve people and engage people in science. And I don't know much about it. I've never worked on one, but I've heard about patient involvement projects and patient engagement, and how, different scientists and researchers, especially in health and medicine, they look into, okay, what are my patients worried about? What is actually making them struggle? How are they worried, and how can actually work on something that's going to benefit them? So I don't know, like, for example, cancer patients will be like, well, I'm worried about this kind of pain, or I'm worried about this kind of symptom. And then scientists go, okay, let's focus on that. And I think you can do that with all the things. You can do that with biodiversity, you can do that with ecology, you can do that with sustainability. I'm just thinking out of the blue, but I think you can do that with that. And that's also kind of like community science, and it's getting people involved in it. It don't mean that necessarily need to be a patient or have a health issue to have that, but you can extend that and actually work with people to see, okay, so what are you worried about? Let's see if we can do that. And that will create that engagement as well. And then that investment, without actually having money involved in it, that will create. So yeah, because I do agree with what Luke was saying, that, that can actually, it's a bit of like a snake that bites its tail. Like, you can actually create a cycle there.
Brilliant. I think, there's a few themes. So thinking about, if you're a patient, maybe you're going to be, and you're part of a research system, then maybe you're going to be more interested, you're going to engage with the science more. Val was telling us a bit earlier about doing some funding on research on ME. So there's like a group of patients who've got involved with there. I'm interested, actually, we have a researcher on education here as well. So Kezia, I think you are also doing research with school children at the moment. Do you find are you interested in this kind of research participation with the students you're working with?
In what aspect? I think, like broadly speaking, yes, but like it depends in what way. Yeah, I think that I think afterwards I kind of realized that when I step back, because now it's Easter holidays, I can't collect any more data, I kind of realized that perhaps I haven't used student voice enough in my research. So that's a problematic. But yeah.
For those of us who aren't doing research at the moment, like what do you mean by that? Like, explain a bit more about that.
About student voice.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
No, just about, like, within my research, where did the data come from? Who is it about? Like, because it's about children, it's about girls in the single sex school, and about them doing how they adapt, or how the teachers are adapting to teach girls art within a single sex setting. And within that, I think I was so focused on, like, what are the teachers doing, that I didn't stop enough or do enough focus groups perhaps with Key Stage 3 students about their experiences. So I feel like now I'm reflecting back on the data I collected, I feel like I've definitely made some mistakes, but that's fine. I'll be writing that up this next 2 weeks.
Well, as we said, we were talking about a bit earlier, like, the mistakes that you make along the road to research. Are they mistakes? Are they opportunities for learning or doing things differently? So, but thank you for sharing. I think that was quite interesting as well, just to see these links that you can see between maybe something more biomedical to something like education.
Yeah. I just want to pick up on this point in the chat from, I'm going to try again. Jorge, he's gone now, so it doesn't really matter. But he's saying, I've got to go and play with my 3-year-old daughter. Maybe someday she will choose a science career. Talk to parents. They're the ones who introduce their kids into science. I'm just going to put that out there because, that's great, but are the parents interested in science? Which parents are going to be introducing their young people, or their children, even as they're called, into science? Which are parents out there ready to do that? Is that a direct? It's up to you, Talkaoke. The direction of the conversation is up to you. If you want to go in that direction, please do choose that direction. If you want to talk about involving, other things that we've been talking about, talk about that as well.
Brilliant. Has anyone got opinions on that? I mean, maybe from some people we haven't heard from just yet. So I think we've got Justine. I think we have Kazia or Kadzia, let me know how to pronounce your name. We've got Helen, Joe, anyone? There we go. There's a wrong from
I
Mikey.
think
I'm
that's
sorry.
Khadija, isn't it? Is that right? Oh, she's got a hand.
Oh, you've got a smile. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey. Hello, guys. It's Khadija. Yeah, you're right. I'm
Thank you very much.
I'm actually a second year biomed student, and I'm thinking about going into research right now. I've had more experience recently working and volunteering at the hospital. And I think I've just been listening and listening to everyone's ideas. And I think what's really stood out for me personally is like putting yourself out there and actually maybe guiding kids a bit more, because what's really important in our generation is actually social media, and we tend to use that a lot more. So maybe teachers should be talking about like LinkedIn and stuff like that a lot more. So that's what I think from my perspective a little bit. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Khadija, yeah, that was right.
Brilliant, thank you, Khadija. So that's a really good point, actually. So thinking about pupils, thinking about teachers, and what we have to learn, like going into the world. So should you be teaching more about things like social media, LinkedIn? Should science communicators, scientists be focusing a bit more on social media? I'm going to go to Charlotte because she's got her hand up.
Hey, so I'm not a scientist, but just going back to the the topic about young people and careers and stuff. So my career is around skills and getting especially disadvantaged young people into a wide variety of careers and just leveling the playing field. And I'm listening to all these fantastic ideas, and I'm thinking actually the majority of the young people that I've worked with, I've worked with very disadvantaged students in places like Haverhill, worked really close with places like North Cambridge Academy. These kids, it's all very great what you're doing, but these kids would not know what to do with a voucher. If you told them here, even if you talk to them about science, they're not getting it. But the one thing I think is really important is that actually in the last year, more young people have wanted to go into STEM careers and medicine, go into nursing and stuff, because they can see how the stuff that they're learning in their science lessons is applied in real life. And I think that's the real key. These the people in the room who are working in science communication, if you want to engage with more than the kids who have the parents at home who are talking to them about science, if you want to engage broader than that audience, then you need to talk to them about how it affects them. And it goes back to what a couple of people were saying about the ME and funding people who are patients. Relate it to your target audience, bring it into their world, and that's how you're going to get them.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte. I'm just going to go over because they have to go away soon. So Justine, I've got some really interesting points in the comment. I know that you have to go soon, so maybe you could leave us with a final thought, maybe sum up some of the things that you've been saying in the chat.
Okay, well, actually, I'm kind of, I'm going to go away and be thinking about the idea of the voucher, actually, which comes from my work background, which is arts and culture. But I think it would be worth a trial. Why not? Even just to kind of see it in some kind of test environment. And I think we might be surprised, even in a science area, what people actually voted for as being important to them. And just to also kind of frame it, my background, my current work role is in knowledge exchange, actually, which is very much brokering up research, at times. So it might be kind of providing opportunities for creative and cultural industries to hear and see showcases of research that is of interest to them, that then sparks their own practice. And then also kind of the other, I'm quite interested in doing it the other way around as well. So it's kind of actually research can then be properly informed by creative industries. In the same way that people are talking about conversation in the first. And anyway, I think that there's something interesting about matching, that kind of work, what I do with the idea of the vouchers and that kind of getting people's buy-in, getting their, it'd be really interesting to see what people felt was important in both science or culture, actually. If there was a way of managing a scheme like that. But, sorry, I do have to run off now. It's really nice to be part of the conversation, even just for a little bit. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Justine. We're going to leave you there, but yeah, well, I think Justine's left us with some great points. You know, that there's this idea of this marketplace for knowledge, or this way that people can actually exchange and buy into ideas and research, and maybe a bit more involved. Christina, you've got your hands up, and anyone else who's part of the chat, if you've got a point, give me a wave, put your hand up on Zoom, and let us know.
I quite like the way that Christina's hand.
It's glowing.
It's glowing. It's almost like a sort of like Catholic sort of kind of painting with a hand glowing in the light there. But anyway,
because he's there. Okay. I wasn't doing that on purpose. Yeah, I was just going to just we were talking about the vouchers and what Justine said about that. I actually did an activity a couple of years ago where scientists pitched different projects to students. They were 13, 14-year-olds, I think. And the students had to decide how to fund those projects. They would have imaginary £1 million. And it was really interesting how invested they got in it when they knew they had a say in it, and they could actually ask questions saying, okay, so I'm going to give you money, or I'm going to give you my investment in some way. And, you know, it was imaginary and they knew that. But that make them actually ask a lot of questions to the scientists and be like, okay, so how is that going to benefit me? And going back to what Shallow was saying, they wanted to know what were the implications on that. So how is that going to be important for me? So you want to go study whales in the Arctic. Okay, so why is that important for me? Why? How is that going to benefit me? And it was really interesting. And it was really interesting in sense of like the really good questions they were asking, how invested they were in actually knowing how the different projects work, and how they were talking about wind turbines and like community-owned wind turbines, or like projects to stop oil being extracted from the Amazon. And they really wanted to know. And I think that makes a point of saying, like, you know, your taxes are paying these projects as well in some way. So you have to be able to actually ask those questions and actually ask scientists, why are you doing this? And ask companies, why are you doing that? Honestly, this was actually a project with schools that were in underprivileged areas of London. So there were not privileged children at all. And they were really, really keen on participating in the activity and knowing more. And it was really interesting to see that from them. And you could see that it can happen. It's not impossible. You can say, oh, you know, people won't get invested. If you actually work in the right way, you do get that. But I think as well that we sometimes forget about the parents. So working in a museum, I can see the museum sometimes being like, oh no, we need to focus on, you know, doing community engagement. That's the word that they always go, and they always go community engagement with children. It's like, well, what about the parents? You also need to invest them in science and what's going on. Yeah, the children are the future, but if the parents are not invested, the children are not going to be invested either. And yeah, I find that really, really interesting.
Do you think it's, I mean, this can be for Christina, it can be for the group as well. You know, do you think it's harder to get parents involved into any kind of research ideas or funding ideas or science as opposed to children? Like, do you think there's like a difference between the interest of children and parents for that? Katie, you want to make a point on that?
I would actually argue with Christina's idea. Personally, my parents have nothing to do with science. They're not interested in it at all. Actually, I recently managed to get my mom interested in science in her 60s. So it actually worked either way around. But, and I think that with children, one of the main reasons why it's easier is that they're more curious and more imaginative. Parents, very often, they have a list of rules they believe in, and they always think within that box, whereas children, they don't have it so rigidly. It's much more fluid. Their ideas may be much more breakthrough, and they may see points which others would just miss. So I still believe that children is a better option than parents, though both would be amazing. It would be the best. And I just wanted to bring in regards to communication. I was helping a very close friend to understand science, someone who hated science at school. And I found that on YouTube, there are a lot of people, a lot of even scientists making videos, having channels where they introduce various scientific subjects in an amazing manner, better than any class in school or university I've ever had. where anyone can understand the subject. And I think it's one of the greatest tools currently.
Brilliant, thank you. So there have got a few things there that I want to pick on. I think we were having this debate about if you want to engage the public with science. Oh, excellent! You've got a round of applause from Christina there. If you want to engage people with science, is it easier to try and target school children or their parents? Do children influence their parents, vice versa? Are there any parents here that maybe disagree with what Katie said? And yeah, where are we going to go with this? So we've got this, and then Katie also threw in this idea of, actually maybe something like YouTube is a really good way of engaging people, and maybe that's the kind of place that we need to look. But where are we going to go with this here? I am interested to hear if there are any parents on the call who disagree or agree with how they're being engaged with about science.
I mean, I have to say, just answering Katie's point, I watch a lot of YouTube videos about science, but it's not necessarily, I mean, I don't know. I say this, it's not based on watching these videos, but is it those charismatic scientists that are good at explaining their research that are actually the best scientists that are deserving of the funding, or is that a different skill? I'm just wondering. Although I watch a lot of them too, and I do find I get a lot of my science knowledge from those videos now, whereas before it might have come from the new scientist that you've got there. I don't really read that anymore because YouTube is more fun and entertaining.
It's archaic, this piece of paper. Yeah. Is what in wasting trees, maybe. Oh, Val, you've got some points there.
Well, you're saying who has children? Well, my children are about your age. And I think, I don't know why, but I'm not an average boomer. I am interested in science. I always have been. I've always made my children interested in everything. My daughter decided she was going to do chemistry. She has a master's in chemistry, and I'm very proud of her because we supported her. I think there are a lot of parents who don't support STEM subjects, but there are quite a few of us who do, and I think there may even be a role for grandparents in all of this, because a lot of grandparents have the time to spend with their younger grandchildren doing the kitchen table chemistry, making the volcanoes that you have to take into year 7, and that sort of thing. So there is a role. You can probably all laugh, but there is a role for the Women's Institute in this.
Okay, brilliant.
Thousands of us, and if you get onto us, we can help. We're not all a load of old fuddy-duddies, although quite a few of them are.
This is great. So actually, Val's coming here with some quite concrete ideas for science communicators, for scientists if they want to engage people about science. Think about the grandparents. Think about targeting institutions like the Women's Institute. I think you mentioned, Val. So that's some good food for thought. I wonder how people react to that. I've got Natalie who's got a hand up, so I'm going to go to Natalie next.
Hiya. Yeah, this is about YouTube and sort of science research. Like Mikey, I also watch a lot of science videos on YouTube. The thing is, I don't necessarily understand them all. They're just kind of fun to watch. And so I think YouTube definitely is a great resource. But personally, I feel that actual discussion with other humans just gives something that you can't get from a screen. Because, you can't ask questions, you can't ask for clarification. And when I'm online, there's a lot of, if you ask someone a question in a Facebook comment, a lot of people come back and they say, Google it, or they just send the link to Google quite cheekily, as if to say, you can do this yourself. But I think that's a really counterproductive way to be. And it's also quite ableist as well. Not everyone is able to do the research, to be discerning in what they read and to take it in and to sort of separate the truth from fiction and from hoaxes and whatnot. So yeah, I do love YouTube. And I think, the internet's a wonderful resource, but there needs to be a balance between that and talking to people.
There's almost this balance between there's so much information on YouTube that actually, Natalie, you're thinking that actually sometimes the really valuable communication happens between people. So and that's where you get maybe trusted information. That's where you can maybe understand things better. Do people agree, disagree with what Natalie's saying?
Well, I mean,
lots of nods.
I think the thing about discussing it with people is got to be, obviously, you know, we're here, the people speak. We can take this Talkaoke table to any institution. So those out there, you know, some of them have already hired us. But, you know, I personally absolutely agree that a two-way communication, it's something also that Luke mentioned before. It's like, if you have more of a conversation, then you can bring in people who can, you know, not undermine, but just challenge some assumptions they might have or some misunderstandings and actually move things forward. So I think that absolutely that conversational style is absolutely huge, I think, for furthering people's understanding of science and their ability to actually partake in the research as well.
Excellent. I'm going to say hello to a few new people who've just joined. So hello, Stella. Hello, Joe. I think you might have joined, and John as well. Hello as well. So we've been talking about where like these ideas about engagement with knowledge, with discussing things, having like a two-way discussion, whether that's between a researcher and a patient, whether that's between someone who wants to learn about science and scientists. We've got lots of people who want to say things. So I'm going to go to Alex and then Katie, or Alexandra. Sorry.
Alex is fine, no worries. Yeah, what you were just saying about the conversation, we're thinking about influencing the public, but when you have a conversation, we also have to think the public's influencing the researchers, and that's really important too, because researchers need to understand the value of their work. So this conversation is so important, and thinking about these science vouchers we were talking about, it's when the researchers have these conversations with the communities. And sometimes they have the conversations with people who their research is impacting directly. It makes them much more aware of what they're doing, and it's influencing their research. So yeah, I totally agree on this line that we, about these conversations is super important, not only for the public, but also for researchers.
Excellent, brilliant. And I'm going to go to Katie next.
Thank you. Just wanted to respond to Natalie. In regards to people just throwing a link in the comments as a response. And whereas I can see the negative points about it, actually her point about some of the information being potentially misleading is one of the reasons why I believe that guiding people to do their own research is a good idea, because in my opinion, nothing can convince people better whether something is true or not, than them doing at least part of the research themselves and going through many different opinions, or at least a lot of different papers. Because there are subjects which are very, very clear, like the answers are very clear, but there are many subjects in science where the answer is fairly vague, at least in physics. So giving a straight answer would straight away be a kind of a warning light for me. If I see a scientist giving a very straight up answer to certain questions, because as far as I know, we haven't gone far enough to be able to find out that answer yet. So in that case, I mean, if people still want to get their opinions on the subject, you have to go through a lot of different data, and even some contradicting the other parts of data. And I think that helps people best, at least it helped me, to figure out, even at the beginning of the pandemic, what to listen to and whom not to listen to, which way the truth is actually going. Because it was a sudden spike online with a lot, like a flood of disinformation. And I found that a lot of people struggled with that because they didn't have any skills in distinguishing between right and wrong information. And it's one of the skills I believe that everyone should get on their own, because anyone giving you that skill can already guide you in one direction or the other. It's kind of a tricky question here, but I think that it's one of the scientific skills everyone should have to better understand science.
Brilliant. So it's kind of like it's almost a bit of a dilemma, because you need to be able to learn how to distinguish the right kind of information. But you think even if someone tries to teach you that, maybe you can't discern whether their method is the best method. That's quite a bit of an existential concept, really. Do people agree, disagree? Maybe Natalie, do you agree? Mikey, have you got an opinion on this? Do you think we need to have this kind of self-reliance on our own kind of way of distinguishing between right and wrong knowledge?
I agree with the principle, but I'm not sure if I agree with it in practice, because I think you need to know what to Google. And I think that, and Google itself has, then suddenly, how big a role has Google got in this whole, this whole area of knowledge distribution or knowledge? It's got a huge role. And is it really up for that role?
Do you think... Okay, come in.
Just to quickly respond, sorry. For me personally, I use Google less and less by the day. So I don't know anymore, because there are so many different search engines. And that's one of the things that people can learn, that Google is just one of many numerous search engines, and different search engines can give different results to the same queries. So that way one can investigate what kind of results Google gives. So one could even learn to research the Google algorithm in a way.
But it sounds like a great concept. Do we have time? Does the average person say on the Talkaoke chat here, do you feel like you have time to do that kind of research, to search multiple search engines? If not, where do you get your information from? How do you try and avoid disinformation?
It's a tough question.
Yeah, people maybe are perhaps a bit stumped about where they can avoid getting disinformation from, perhaps. Maybe you think that you've been given a lot of disinformation already. I don't know, maybe it might be interesting.
I can gladly share my method. I can gladly share my method. It works so far. I usually found few sources which I trust, so long as they don't give too many contradicting ideas. Once they give, I immediately look for more sources. But it's kind of a never-ending cycle. I never have a single source for longer than a year or two lately, because it's kind of a never-ending cycle where I continuously try to monitor what's happening, because those people who give their ideas, those people who share the research, they tend to have certain opinions and stick to them anyway.
Okay, so
a good example of one YouTube
scientists have got their own agenda potentially, and they're sort of trying to further maybe their research. We've got a few people who are working in science here on the Talkaoke virtual table. Do you agree? I know Siobhan, you've worked in quite a few different labs before. Do you agree with Katie that there's even practicing scientists are always having to put forward a particular agenda?
Possibly. I guess if I'm looking at a scientific or biomedical problem research or question I have, I tend to use PubMed, but that is all very, very scientific papers. So it's not, there's a huge debate about making all of the journal publications open source or free to read, because sometimes you have to pay a subscription if you're not a member of a university. I think that's a huge push for more publication. More and more publications now are free access. But at the same time, I personally don't think the general public would have enough scientific background to read scientific papers. But yes, I mean, scientific problems are, sometimes there are contradicting research papers. Sometimes something disproves an old research paper and things move on. So there is that, but I definitely think disinformation around science is a huge problem. I mean, even simply the fact that there are still anti-vax people that exist in the time of COVID, but they can find information on the internet that backs up their own beliefs. And if they're not willing to sort of see the other side or change their mind, they will just keep finding the information they are looking for. So that, I think, is a peril of the internet. And the fact that I think maybe the general public don't have a very strong scientific background in general. I don't know if that's to do with interest or schools or children finding it difficult, because I found science the easier thing to understand and learn at school, science and maths, and I struggled with English literature, but I don't think that that's the norm. So yeah, I don't know how that can change. So that's my thoughts.
Do people agree? I mean, we have this discussion here about open access scientific papers. You know, are we able, if they were open access, you know, would the public be able to benefit from them? You know, would that be like a good source? We also have a mention of anti-vaxxers. You know, actually, if you go online and you're looking for anti-vax research, you might be able to find multiple sources that agree with you. What do people here think about those topics?
I mean, I think it's also there's another kind of, you know, we always look for the evidence that agrees with our initial outlook rather than trying to find something that contradicts it to begin with. And I think that's everybody, scientists and non-scientists alike. And that is obviously a dangerous, I think, flaw in our psychology, that we're always looking for things to agree with us, not the things that will disprove what we think.
So is it a lost case? Val, you've got your hand up.
I think that more should be available for the general public to read, just because the general public may not be scientifically literate does not mean that they are unintelligent. If you're interested enough to be trying to read a good, well-written piece of research, then you're going to learn how to read it.
Great. So Val's saying, you know, actually, like, there are a lot of people willing out there to really put the time in and to trying to understand maybe something that's a bit more complicated than they're used to. We've got a thumbs up from Luke. So I think lots of people. So it seems to be the answer is, yeah, we do want this information to be open access. Does anyone think there might be a problem with this? I don't know if Christina's putting her hand up or she's that's all right, don't worry.
I mean, I think having this information, you know, even with a lot of these things, you can already kind of search for the abstract of you know, in scientific journals, even if you can't. And as a non-scientist, that's probably as far as it's going to get anyway. I don't think that, I mean, I do agree 100% that all scientific research should be open access, but I don't think that's really the problem when it comes to engagement or how we value different, because I think that's essentially what this problem is about. Is how do we value different, like, scientific research, and how does the public value it? I think the issue is not so much that, although I do think, you know, that's a separate question about who's got the access to that science. I think in the end, it's all got to be open and accessible to all, but that accessibility also means understanding as well.
Has anyone got any, solutions for this problem, do you think? You know, why are we having this issue with things being open access? Are we going to struggle with this understanding? We've got a few people who are science communicators. You know, do you see that? How do you see yourself in that role? Do you think that we had a bit of point earlier actually from Val saying that a lot of the people who are doing the communicating about science to the general public aren't actually that scientifically literate. So is that a problem? Do you find that yourselves as maybe science communicators? What is a science communicator? We've got lots of things there to maybe pull out there. If you've got an opinion, let us know. I've got, at the moment, Katie has got her hand up, so I'm going to go to Katie.
Thank you. What I found very, very, very beneficial is a lot of people online, on the same YouTube or even on forums and so on, they take the time, they're scientists, and they take their time to break down the scientific paper and explain it in a common language. I think if scientists would get kind of a habit when they publish a paper to make a video of explaining it to a common person, that would be amazing. And I think it would help everyone, both the scientists to get their funding and the public support, and the people to understand what science is actually doing and how it works. But very often there seems to be time availability discrepancy. So I don't know whether special departments in research organizations should be to describe those papers in a common language. Because yes, it is possible to spend a long time figuring it out and learning to read them. But I have to agree with opinions where someone said, do we really have the time? Thanks to this lockdown, I did have the time, but I didn't have before then. And I'm not sure if I would have afterwards.
Okay, brilliant. So Kate, so, you know, actually maybe one of the steps of producing a research paper as a scientist is then you have to make a video about it, or you have to write something where you're breaking it down. You got a thumbs up from Stella. Welcome, Stella. If you want to share your opinions, maybe share your own experience of this topic. Please pop your camera in, pop your microphone on, tell us what you know, share your own experiences of this. I've also got a hand up from Christina, who's also agreeing, and we've got lots of things going on in the chat, but Christina, we're going to go to you first.
Yeah, I wanted to say that Katie's idea about scientists just explaining the papers straightforwardly, that's a brilliant idea. I think that's something that it would be lovely if it happened, but if you ask scientists, and they will say, well, that I don't have the time, I don't have the funding, and some scientists wouldn't be able to do that. Also, that will put us, our science communicators, out of a job, I think, and that would be really sad. But in all honesty, I think that would be amazing. And I think that's why science communicators are important as well, because if a scientist can't do that or don't have the time to do that, we can be there, be like, cool, let's do it, I can do it, and we can do it. And and I think that's how that's like a basic line of a science communicator can be. It's a person that can actually put in like not simple word, but not scientific words, what a paper is saying. And somebody said on the chat as well that, you know, when you read a media article about a paper that has come up, read the paper if you can understand it, but not everyone can do that. So it's really frustrating when you see an article in the media and then you read the paper and you go, that's not what they're saying. Because you know that, I can do it, and some people will be able to do it, but they won't be able to do it. So I would love for scientists to be like, this is my paper that I published here for all the scientists, but this is for you, for the public. This is what it means, and understand it. That would be brilliant.
Charlotte, you've got a point to add that you want to add there.
Sure. Just following on from what you were saying, Christina, and then looping it back to what Katie was saying earlier, when you're teaching the general public how to read science papers, I think there are three really big things. And I say this again as a non-scientist, as someone who, you guys are all very bright. I'm in a different world to you guys. But one is to teach people how to look at who funded the research, because often that's really important. The second is to teach people to look for how many participants were in the research. If they're saying that 70% of British people eat cheese every day, but they only did research with 10 people, then that doesn't. And then the third one is to teach the difference between correlation and causation. I think with these three things, which could be taught at a very basic level, you could really equip people. You don't have to read the whole piece of research. You just need to find those three things, and instantly whether to trust something or not.
Great. So we've got three quite clear guidelines. Luke, you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's really good. It's a really good summation of like simple things you can teach to people. And I agree that I think we should be teaching kids that at school. Like I would have benefited from learning that as a life skill. But there was they did it quite a while ago. I think it was in Chicago, in the Science Museum in Chicago. They had an exhibition and it was about climate change, but it was actually about data, and it was about the difference between say, for example, your own experience and a peer-reviewed journal, and three different types of evidence. So like it explained what anecdotal evidence was, and then it gave you all these different things. And then afterwards, and it was just about, sort of climate change, but it wasn't saying climate change is real. But after the exhibition, they did their research and they got feedback from the visitors, and they found that people were more open to the actual real science after being taught how to tell the difference between anecdotal evidence and peer-reviewed evidence and stuff like that. And I think like a really big challenge working in science communication is about confidence. Is if people don't feel confident in being challenged, then they will just retreat to what they think, whether that's true or not. And so I think a lot of it is really about the very basics of education, of teaching people to be able to ask questions, and also to be able to not know the answer to something, and like for people to feel comfortable to say, I don't know that right now, but I am going to find out. People haven't been supported. I mean, I don't think I was when I was at school. Some good teachers would teach me that, but bad teachers would be, if you don't know the answer, then you need to work harder or you're stupid. So it's like there's a fundamental problem in how we educate kids, I think. So we need to get back to basics.
Back to basics, empowering people to make them feel more confident, teaching them those three ideas that Charlotte had of looking at the data, following the money, seeing who's funded the research. We're talking about, how we do science, how people engage with science. Luke was mentioning how if people sort of were taught how to critically assess a paper or a piece of science or a piece of evidence, then they're more likely to engage more and be more open-minded. We've got some new people who've joined the chat. I think we've got Mimi and Lucinda. Let me know if I'm pronouncing your names correctly. Welcome. We're coming into the last little bit of Talkaoke. Getting close to the end. I think I've got Mikey who wants to come in and appoint first.
I just want to say, I think we were doing Talkaoke on Thursday and we're talking about the nature of intelligence. And I think, it's actually more intelligent sometimes to say I don't know than bullshit some half-known answer. And I think we see I don't know as unintelligent when we should actually be. I think that's an issue.
Well, we are getting to the point. I've got behind me, Rick has been doing some visuals throughout. So we've just Google. Do you just do Google, or do you research a few more search engines for getting your ideas, for getting your research ideas? Because we're getting nearer the end, what we're going to do is in true Talkaoke tradition, we're going to go around for our final thoughts. So that's where, if people who don't know, we go around the table or around our virtual table and get your final thoughts of something that you've thought about today in the discussion, maybe a new idea you want to throw out there, or something that you just want to share with the group as your final chance to be part of the Talkaoke table. For today, we have another one on Saturday, the following Saturday. So has anyone want to kick us off with some final thoughts that they want to give for this discussion? Whether it's about research, whether it's about disinformation. Luke, we're going to go to you first.
Yeah, I'll just say thanks to everyone for having a chat. It was really interesting. I always enjoy Talkaoke, and it's the people that turn up. So I learned loads, and yeah, it was very, very good fun, especially during lockdown. So thanks for turning up.
Fantastic. Thank you. An excellent start, I think, from the final thoughts. Thank you very much, Luke, for being part of it and sharing your anecdotes and sharing your stories. We're going to go round again. So some final thoughts.
It is anecdotal evidence.
It is anecdotal evidence. So is it true? Is Talkaoke that good? We don't know. We're going to have to do something else about it. A final thoughts. Have we got final thoughts perhaps from Val? Have you got any final thoughts you want to add? I think you might be on mute, Val. Sorry, I took you unawares there.
Don't judge people by their age or their education. I left school when I was 16. Yet I can read papers. I can understand almost all that I've seen today. And as Charlotte was saying, scientific literacy is the most important thing.
Brilliant. You've got some air horns there for you, Val. Scientific literacy is the most important thing. I'm going to go over to Iona. Any final thoughts from you?
I think I agree. Apart from making data available, we also need to give the people two tools, help them develop critical thinking, maybe by giving them the opportunity to discuss with us, hear their thoughts, creative thinking and these kind of things, I think will help to connect public and scientists. And I believe that active listening is key for success and being able to communicate information. And yes, like for example, coronavirus and people understanding how important it is to follow the rules with good hygiene practices and isolating at home so that we don't spread it out. It's very important that we make science simple enough that even 5-year-olds can understand. That's the message I want scientists to take home. And then it's important for the public to also have bravery and come to us and talk about
things that aren't clear to them, so that we know and we manage to collaborate better together.
Excellent. So breaking down ideas, a lot of active listening, which a lot of people have been doing here. In fact, everyone's been doing here on Talkaoke today. So we're partway there. We've taken the first step. Any other final thoughts that we want to add from people on the table?
I noticed that Simon's come on and turned his camera on as if he was maybe shaping up for a final thought. I don't know.
I can go if you want. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, sorry, I've listened to the whole conversation, but I've been cooking at the same time or prepping for dinner, so I've avoided chopping off my fingers, which is always a good sign. And I've been fascinated by the conversation as per usual. You've all smashed it, and it's been really, really spectacularly interesting. I don't think I've disagreed with much at all. But I just want to say that educationally wise, the STEM subjects are going to be a huge focus. Now, the UK government is dealing with its kind of, what's its future plan now that we're drying up of any kind of industry or labor or anything like that. What do we need to succeed as a power in the future? As nefarious as that might sound, that's kind of what they're weighing up. And so STEM is heavily a focus. You talked earlier on about the parents' generation and should we be inspiring them, but I don't think they're really seeing that as a priority. That's a byproduct. If the kids are interested in it, hopefully the adults will be able to push that a bit more, but there's going to be such a heavy emphasis in the coming generations as to the children just need to be spark that interest. You never know where it's a little bit like football, where they're getting kids at an early age to who could be the next Ronaldo or Messi. And, if you can inspire enough kids, who could be the next one that makes the country shitloads of money in the fuure and makes the educational investment worth it? Sorry to sound cynical, but that's exactly what's going to happen. So, it should be interesting to see what the future holds, and I think accessibility of information is going to be key for that. How we discern bad information from good information, but all of these things are very, very relative. I think somebody put in the chat when I poked my nose in a little while ago, is there such thing as an objective truth? And I don't know. There's definitely better truths, I think, but there's definitely going to be a lot of heated debate over all this stuff.
Brilliant, Simon. So STEM is the future, but maybe only well-funded STEM is the future. So the STEM that the science and the technology can make money off. So maybe it's a bittersweet future. We're going to go next to Christina for your final thought.
Yeah, I think I've really enjoyed the chat today, and I've really everything that people were saying, and when people were asking questions, responding to questions, was really, really inspiring and made me think about things I was saying. I was like, actually, I never thought about that. So thank you so much for everyone for sharing all that with us. I think what I take from these is that it's really important to empower people. So the same way that it's really important to communicate science with people, it's important to empower them to be actually able to understand science by themselves, be able to read papers regardless of the background or the education or anything, and to finally not actually need science communicators, science educators to actually help them do that, to let them do it, give them the authority that they need to actually do it. And in the meantime, we'll do what we can to hopefully not get to that future that Simon was painting, which I'm quite cynic about it, but thank you so much, everyone.
I just want to say, Christina, I personally think that with a higher literacy of science and with all researchers doing YouTube videos about their science, I don't think that means the end of science communication. I think that means like more science communicators, because somebody's got to have to connect all of this together.
Brilliant. So we're talking about, so we've got more science. We want more science communicators. We want more people in STEM. I think this might be a good time to go to Kadzia to ask you. You're someone who's been studying science. You've been doing some volunteering. You might be taking that next step into research. Can we go to you to your final thoughts?
So I definitely agree with all of the STEM stuff. So what I think is that kids are definitely getting a lot smarter nowadays with all the accessibility to everything. So maybe me as a student, I should be putting myself out there to maybe volunteering or just to help with careers and career advice and workshops maybe for students. Not rather it be something that's taught, but maybe uni students could be doing workshops for these kids. So I don't know if the audio is going a bit funny.
Brilliant.
But so that's what I think.
I think that's got a great thought to lead us on, because actually what you know, in some ways, you guys have got the scientific literacy, and it's like taking those next steps into like turning that literacy and that scientific understanding into a future career as well. So I think that's a brilliant final thought. Thank you. We're coming up to our last minute. So anyone else can I go to for a final thought who'd like to share before we play our outro music? I think Katie, we're going to go to you.
My final thought will be the one which we didn't have time to discuss and I really wanted to, is where a lot of research is hidden behind the doors of, let's say, intellectual property or national security and such. And how do we make science open when many projects have to be hidden?
Excellent.
That would be something to think about.
I think that's a really good place. We know we've got some of the X-Files music playing in the background. So how do we get past that intellectual property? How do we share scientific research? We want to talk about this more, but we can't because we're coming to the end of our session. But I'm going to lead over to Mikey, who's got some important information to share with you.
Exactly the same time, except obviously the clocks are going to have gone forward, but exactly the same time at 4:30 next week, we have got the second session of this series, the second last, and actually we've almost kind of preempted that because it is about the question of trust. Who do we trust? How do we gain trust as well? Like, how do we actually build up that trust? And a lot of that, I think, has been suggested this time about empowering people, almost anticipating their understanding rather than expecting them not to understand. There's all these things that I think have come out of this session, and I think that, this can feed really nicely into next week's session.
Fantastic. So if you enjoyed what you had a taste of today, come and join us next Saturday. I've been Evie, this has been Mikey, this has been Talkaoke.
I think we've still got time for, if there's any final thoughts. Let's just, I know we're against the clock here, but I feel like we should open it up because I don't want to get accused of shutting people down. Has anyone else got a final thought that they want to put into the chat? You speak now or wait until next week. It's up to you. John, have you got anything to say? Stella has not said anything. Lucinda, now's your chance. Anybody?
Just thinking some stuff up. We've got Stella. Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone, from Natalie as well. We've got, and Stella seemed to enjoy it as well. Thank you for your comments in the chat. If you want to say something, please pop your video on. If not, Mikey is going to play the outro music. He's playing crickets at the moment.
Yeah, I know, because we didn't get any more extra final thoughts, any like big ones at the end, but we've got next week, so do come back next week. It's been fantastic to hear everyone's opinions. It's been a really, I think important conversation that had to be had now. So until next week, we'll see you all.
Goodbye. Thank you very much, everyone. We've got some celebrations from Luke, some claps from Stella. Thank you very much, Stella. And you guys can, a heart from Simon and Brian. Thank you, Simon. Or Brian, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Val. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Emily, for being a wonderful host for today. Thank you, Margot. Thank you, John. We've got, I can hear our Facebook recording in the background, but that's all right. So this is all online as well. At the moment, we're just going to keep waving and getting that light, saying goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you very much, everyone. We've got some celebrations from Luke, some claps from Stella. Thank you very much, Stella. And you guys can, a heart from Simon and Brian. Thank you, Simon. Or Brian, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Val. Thank you, Emily. Being a wonderful host today. Thank you, Margot. Thank you, John.